guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are currently in debt, then this video is going to be perfect for you because I'm going to be talking about 4 strategies that you could use to pay off your debt quickly and as soon as possible. I'm also going to be talking about the pros and cons for each method, and at the end of the video I'm also going to be revealing my favorite strategy as well. So if you are new here, my name is Veronia and I talk about all things to do with money, your career and creating a positive mindset for success. So if you do like the sound of that, then be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell notification below so you don't miss out on any future videos. So in one of my previous videos I spoke about my debt journey, and I did actually mention 2 methods that I use to pay off my own personal debt. So in this video I thought I would give you a bit more detail on how you can actually use those methods, plus I have an extra 2 strategies that you could potentially use as well. Now when I'm talking about these strategies, I'm really talking about tackling any high interest or consumer debt. So this would include things like car loans, personal loans or credit cards, and this would be in comparison to other debts that have maybe a lower interest rate, so things like your mortgage or student loan for example. And the reason why I'm focusing more on consumer debt is because they do tend to have relatively high levels of interest rate, whereas with things like a mortgage or student loan they tend to be a lot more long term, and they also tend to have lower rates of interest as well. So you might decide to focus more on investing or building an emergency fund before you really start to pay your mortgage or student loan off. So the first strategy you could use is called the debt snowball method. And this method has been really highlighted by a guy called Dave Ramsey, who I like to think of as a financial tycoon. Now Dave Ramsey has helped thousands of people with their personal finances, especially when they're trying to get out of debt. Now he is US based, but I genuinely think with this method you can use it anywhere. And basically what you would do is actually list all of your debts, smallest to largest, regardless of the interest rate. Then once you've got that list, you would actually attack the smallest debt first, and then you would make minimum payments on all the other debts. So when I talk about attacking that first debt, it needs to be intense. You need to be finding money where you can and trying to pay that small debt off as soon as possible. And what Dave actually suggests is that you should be selling everything. The kids even think they're next. You shouldn't be going to any restaurants. You should literally be on rice and beans until you pay that debt off. Now you might not want to go that crazy because you might find that you're literally eating noodles every single month. But I do think trying to find as much money as possible to pay off that smallest debt is a really good idea. Then once you've paid off that smallest debt, that money that you use plus the minimum payment you would have been using for the smallest debt will then go towards the second debt, and then it will keep going until you pay off the last debt. So it ends up being like a huge snowball at the end. So as an example, let's say that you have 3 debts that you need to try and pay off. The first one is that you have £10,000 credit card debt with a 15% interest rate. Then the second is an £8,000 car loan with a 10% interest rate. And the third one is a £1,000 personal loan with a 12% interest rate. So with the debt snowball method, you would actually be paying your personal loan first because it's the smallest debt when you forget about the interest rate. Then you would pay your car loan, and then you would pay your credit card last. So one of the pros is the fact that Dave actually suggests that when we think about personal finance and money and debt, a lot of it is actually based on 80% behavior and only 20% head knowledge. So this method actually then focuses on that behavior element. And that's why with this method you try to attack the smallest debt first, because then you're able to get those quick wins, and then once you've paid that small debt off you probably feel quite happy about that, and then you feel like you can then attack the next one. So I do think you're more likely to feel a lot more confident once you've attacked that first debt. Now the con would mainly be based on maths, because actually if you're only looking at just paying the smallest debt first and not even thinking about the interest rate, you would probably end up paying a lot more interest overall. But if you're the type of person that would really value those quick wins, then this method is probably the best one for you. The second strategy you could use is called the debt avalanche method. And this method actually does focus more on the interest rate. So like the debt snowball method, you would list all of your debts, but rather than just looking at the overall amount, you would actually list those debts by the highest interest rate to the lowest. So then the first debt you want to pay off and the major focus would be the one with the highest interest rate. And then you would also pay minimum payments on the other debts. So as another example, let's say you have £20,000 credit card debt with a 17% interest rate. Then you also have a £10,000 car loan with a 9% interest rate. And then you also have a £25,000 personal loan with a 6% interest rate. So with this method, you would firstly want to focus on the credit card, Then you would move over to the car loan, and then lastly the personal loan. And that's because the credit card has the highest interest rate. So a major pro is, of course, you will be able to save a lot more money in interest payments because, again, you've tackled the highest one first. However, this method doesn't actually take into account your behaviors or emotions in this process. And this is because if you are tackling one with the highest interest rate, that could have a relatively large balance, so it might take some time to actually pay it off. And psychologically, we like to see quick wins. We like to see a little bit of success. Because if it's going to take you more than 18 months just to pay that first debt off, it might be quite difficult to keep motivated if you're not really seeing any results. But of course, when you're thinking about maths, it does make sense to use this method. So if you do feel like you have the resilience to stick to that plan, then you could definitely use this method. So the first strategy that you could use is known as the debt tsunami method. Now, I actually got this from manversusdebt.com, but I thought it was a really interesting method. So basically, this method suggests that you should actually pay off your debts in order of their emotional impact. And the reason for this is because when we're thinking about things like debt and money, it can actually be a really emotional subject. So if there is a particular debt that creates a massive emotional burden on you, then you probably want to pay that off as soon as possible. So let's say, as an example, it turns out that you owe £2,000 to your brother-in-law, but he's decided that he doesn't want to charge you any interest at all because you're family, but then you're also £5,000 in credit card debt with a 15% interest rate. Well, with this method, if it turns out the money you owe to your brother-in-law is creating so much tension, ideally you would probably want to pay that off before the credit card, even if it's the smallest debt. So like the debt snowball, this method is actually quite good because it really does focus on the human element. You can also mix this method with one of the others, so you might actually decide to first tackle the debt that has the biggest emotional impact on you. Then at least once you've paid that off, you can then decide whether you want to focus on the debt snowball or the debt avalanche. Again, a con is very similar to the debt snowball in the fact that it doesn't actually focus on the interest rate, so you could end up paying more interest overall. And if the debt that has the biggest emotional impact really does have a large amount, then it could take a while to pay off, and it means that you're not able to see those quick wins like in the debt snowball method. But if there is that one debt that's creating so much tension for you, then it's probably better off to just pay that off with this method. So that's where this method is really useful. So the fourth strategy that you could use is called the debt snowflake method. And this is actually where you pay off your debt using any small savings that you can find. So this really focuses on trying to get any extra small day-to-day savings that you can try to use to pay off your debt, which I guess could be illustrated like small snowflakes. This is a really interesting method because you might find that the small day-to-day savings that you make towards your debt can actually end up having a big impact overall. So as an example, you might end up finding a £20 note lying around. So rather than using the money to buy something else, you could decide to put that towards your debt instead. You might also get maybe an unexpected tax return, so you would also try to put that money towards your debt. Or you might even decide not to go to Starbucks or Costa one day and try to save that money and then put that towards your debt as well. So I think this method is good because you do have these small savings that you can really try to put towards your debt so that hopefully you're able to pay off your debt a lot quicker. But I guess a con would be that this method doesn't actually tell you which debt to pay off first. So on its own, it may not actually be that useful, but I think you could definitely use this with the snowball, avalanche or tsunami method together. So I do think it does have its place. So my favorite strategy, which may or may not surprise you, is actually the debt snowball method. Now, when I'm thinking about how I paid off my debt, I didn't really use the debt snowball method. I did try it a little bit, but I did end up focusing more on the debt avalanche method. But that was only because I only had 2 debts. The first one was an overdraft, but it was interest-free for a set amount of time. And the second was a car loan. So because my overdraft was interest-free, for me it did make sense that I should just try and pay off the car loan as quick as possible because I didn't really have any interest to pay with the overdraft. Whereas I do think that if my overdraft did charge interest, then I think I would have taken the snowball method and tried to pay that off first. And that's mainly because I do think having that quick win would have really helped me with my motivation. But then also, now that I think about it, I have basically tried all 4 of those methods. So I did try the debt snowball method until I realized I should really just focus on one strategy. And with my personal debts, it just made sense that I should just be using the debt avalanche method. And now that I think about it, I think I did end up using the debt tsunami method because when it came to my car loan, I kept thinking if I lost my job, I have no idea how I'm going to be able to pay those minimum payments. So I just needed to get it over and done with, to be honest. Again, with the snowflake, if I had any other extra money, that was put towards my debt. Even when I got compensated for my car accident, I made sure that I put some of that money straight towards my debt. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I did mention that in my debt story, so be sure to watch that as well. Again, I'll probably put a link above and below. So if you did like this video, then please do give me a thumbs up and let me know in the comments, have you tried these methods before? If you have, did they work well? Did they not work well? I do post every single Friday, so if you are looking for more, then be sure to subscribe to my channel and I will see you next week.